just wanna.
Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself?
Remember, give thanks, preserve. As I was asked to MC, I wondered what I could or should talk about. I also realize I only have 5 minutes. That's approximately 700 words to wrap up 20 years of memories from the flood of 1997. I've worn many hats, and I've shared words, I've shared stories. Some of my words and stories tonight, most of you have not heard from this voice as I saw it in my eyes in the flood of 97. Tonight, I'm not the reporter, I'm not the broadcaster, I'm not the dad, I'm not the husband, I'm not the radio station owner, I'm a guy. To talk about 20 years ago, and I hope I do justice. After the funeral of Bernadette's mother, we drove back through North Dakota on our way home to Ada and saw all the water and had an empty feeling in the stomach. When we returned to Ada, the 10-foot pile of snow in our driveway when we left on Tuesday was now down to less than 1 foot. It was April 4, 5, 6, and 7. Those 4 days, in my eyes, is when it all started, depending upon where you lived and what you were doing in your life at that time. Arriving home on Friday evening and getting up on Saturday morning, as the Ada Borup PTC president, I informed Olin Church that I would not be helping at the PTC Craft Fair because the transmitter site was underwater. As family members were here for that weekend, because it was to be Jake's first communion on Sunday, which was postponed because of no power, the radio station was now off the air, and I went uptown to see Greg Holmvik, who was the civil defense director, and it was not looking good. On Sunday, I spoke with Mr. Holmvik, and he said, "Burke, you've got a wife and 3 little kids. Get the hell out of town." So we spent the night in Borup at the school. On Monday, we went to Fargo, driving down the road as power lines were across the road. On Tuesday, I received a phone call from Greg Holmvik that implied, "I need help. The media is driving me nuts. I don't know how to deal with them. You do. Would you come back and help?" I had now found my comfort. To get a ride back to Ada and to have to go through security to get back into the community, I wondered, where had my freedom gone? I wondered what would happen to the community, to my family, to my business. To tell Mayor Russ Onstad at the time when I returned that we would now be having morning and nightly meetings and that we would squash all the rumors and all stories would now come through myself and through Greg Holmvik. Somewhere in my possessions, I have those daily notes and that diary and audio. The factual stories would soon be coming out. The Norman County Index would not miss a publication. We would sleep on the cop shop floor. We would spend a night sleeping in the front seat of the fire truck inside the fire hall. We were blessed with the National Guard to come to provide cots so that we could sleep on a cot. Steve Petrie, Bruce Visser, many others, and myself, a bond was formed. CNN reporters, all media outlets, to stand next to FEMA Director James Lee Witt with Superintendent Don Valinga in the old high school on the steps going down with cheeks filled with tears, and to know, even though it was unofficial, that there was a gut feeling that FEMA would allow for the school to be rebuilt. The Red Cross, the Salvation Army, giving thanks for 20 years every time I see a kettle. To stay in the Norman Motel, a wife, a mother, 3 kids, 5 in one room, and to watch the TV and to see the fires in Grand Forks and tears run down my cheeks, and to be able to say, they have it worse. It was time to move forward. It was time to move on. With every power outage to follow, created more stress, more headaches. The transmitter site to this day brings back memories. That old building has been removed, but the memories are still there. The appreciation supper with the National Guard in June of '97. I have more stories. It's not left me. There's still some scars that come up preparing for tonight. It's 20 years in 5 minutes, 700 words. To remember, to give thanks, to preserve. Tonight we will do that. At this time, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Sean Yates, Superintendent of the Ada Borup School. Dr. Sean Yates, a native of Western Pennsylvania, Superintendent of the Ada Borup School at present time, completing his doctorate in educational administration from the University of South Dakota and relocating to Ada this past year with his wife Meredith and 4 children, Abigail, Ella, Camden, and Xander, who are all current Ada Borup students. Please welcome Dr. Sean Yates.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome all of you here this evening. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the Ada Borup School for this event of remembrance. As we see in the programs, there are 3 distinct themes to tonight: remember, give thanks, and preserve. 20 years ago, I was in college and had assuredly never heard of Ada, Minnesota, let alone considered the fact that I would ever live here. Being from Western Pennsylvania, my only impression of Minnesota at that time was in the form of the recently released Coen Brothers film Fargo. Yeah, sure, you betcha. So when I considered the 3 themes, remember is a difficult one for me. However, I would like to speak to the other 2. Having moved here 1 year ago, I feel that I can certainly speak to the give thanks. You see, in my position of school district leadership, my wife and children come along for the ride, and sometimes this can be unfair to them. But that is not the case in what we have found here. What we have found in Ada is a place of life, a place of excellence, a place of grace. Much of my life is spent in the offices, the classrooms, the hallways of this school building. But if what is found within these walls is a microcosm of the larger community, then we are blessed to live in a pretty special place. I give thanks for the children, the families, the teachers, the servant leadership that is exhibited by many. It truly takes a community effort to maintain this level of excellence. As to the 3rd theme, preserve, I'm honored to lead this district as the current superintendent. It is a pleasure to arrive here each day to continue to carry the mantle that has been so beautifully brought forward. I'm grateful to my predecessors who will follow me in speaking this evening, and to you all as members of this community. I trust that we will continue to work together to lead Ada into the next phase of life. Thank you for your attendance tonight and your support of this event. I look forward to commemorating this and the celebration of life, resilience, and community found here in Ada, Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yates. Amber Alexander Roaring is a 1997 graduate of the Ada Borup High School. She's a registered nurse working for the Fargo VA healthcare system and resident in the Cormorant Lakes area with her husband, Jeremy, and two sons, Cooper and Max. Please welcome Amber Alexander Roaring.
Actually, I'll speak for Amber. Can you take this? What we're doing is we're having the class of 97 and the class of 2017. They have a plaque, and it's going to go when we have our documentary, and we have this plaque is going to go underneath that TV screen where the documentary is. And it says, from the class of 97 and the class of 2017, in honor of the 20th anniversary of the flood of 1997. Where's Ella? She's coming. Okay. So Ella represents the class of 2017. Amber represents the class 1997. One more picture. A couple more pictures.
Our next speaker will be Mike Kolness from Hendra, Minnesota. Mike, with an educational degree from Mayville State University and the Minnesota State University Moorhead, teacher, coach, principal, and athletic director and superintendent of the Ada Borup schools from 1990 through 2016. Currently the superintendent of schools for the East Grand Forks Independent School District, East Grand Forks, Minnesota. Please welcome Mike Kolness.
Thank you very much, Jim. First of all, it's great to be home. This is home. I really hope I can hold it together, to be honest. When Jim started talking about some of the memories from 1997, it really struck a nerve. And really the last, 2 to 4 weeks, with all of the news stories that came out about Ada, the flood of 97, and also what happened in Grand Forks and East Grand Forks, because that's where I live now. And it just was, it was really tough to handle, to be honest. So I just want to say that one more time. It is great to be home. I want to put a big thank you out there, because otherwise I'm going to forget. First of all, students and band members, thank you very much. Please give them a big round of applause. I am willing to bet that it's been interesting to work with Mr. Tuttle lately. Yes or no? Okay, I bet. Knowing Mr. Tuttle. Thank you very much to the school board members and staff who I worked with for 26 years. Great memories, no better support than here. Community members. I look around the room, a lot of friends, a lot of former students. I still can't believe Amber Alexander, as I would know her, graduated 20 years ago. Holy buckets. Really makes the guy feel old. Carl, where's Carl Swenson? All right, Carl, there you are. 14 years old, is that right, or are you 15 now? 14 years old. Boy, you are something special. I cannot imagine the amount of hours that you have put into this with that magical musical mind of yours. Thank you very much. And just so you know, Carl's mother is a double cousin to my wife. So that's kind of crazy. So thank you for sharing, Jan. To Don Valenga, to the city leaders and former school board members who were here in 97. I don't think you understand the impact you've had on the students and the community members in the last 20 years. This should really be named the house that Don built. Thank you, Don. And last but not least, Mr. Tuttle. How many mornings do we spend together? Bright and early, 6:30 in the morning. Mr. Tuttle and I are usually here about when the cooks get here. And he would stop in and he'd always tell me, he'd always go, boss, if I'm doing too much, just pull me back. And we've had to do that quite a bit. But I'd much rather, I'd rather have a staff member where you have to pull the reins back than to have to kick them in the shorts. So thank you, Richard. I know that you've done a wonderful job, but I'm real willing to believe the staff is looking forward to fewer emails from you. What do I remember about the flood of 97? I remember the deep snow, the winter storms. I remember sandbagging up until the flood. How many of you remember where you were when the power went out? Please raise your hand. I remember. I saw Candy Robertson here tonight. I was at your house. We were sandbagging, and things just went silent. We all went home. I bailed with Kathy for probably 6-7 hours until we were told the power wasn't going to come back on that night. And then the tough story started. I remember being on the first bus out of town. How many remember Ken Schultz? Custodian, bus driver, nicest guy around. He was the main man driving the bus. He didn't know if the road was open. I was his co-pilot. With 3 little daughters with. We made it to Borup. Great job, Ken. And then I also remember the drive back into town, just like Jim, going through the National Guard and seeing the mounds of ice. How about the recovery? I remember our first meeting at the VFW with the staff. We didn't have cell phones. You didn't have text messages. None of that. We were all back there. Mr. Valenga, Mr. Christensen, Mr. Church, and then representatives from Krause Anderson and those other finance groups. We talked about getting things back to normal. We came up with a plan, or they came up with a plan where we had temporary facilities. And I remember teaching in the 4-H building when it was still just a 4-H building with tin walls. And I'll remember there were 6 of us. I don't know why they put 6 men out there, but it was Jim Everson, Kevin Lindell, teaching science with those long, colorful picnic tables. Nathan Purrington teaching ag. Trevor Keller was teaching special education, which really he brought the weight room with him. And if you knew Trevor, you'd know why. And Gene Shutt and I, my partner, Gene Shutt. And I saw Vonda Lee here tonight, so that's just wonderful. But I'll never forget, we had these huge heaters, like 500,000 BTU heaters that were loud. And we had tarps between our walls when we were teaching math. And at the end of one day, Gene just walked over, he pulled the plug on both of the heaters, and he just says, I just need peace. And I'll never forget that. I also remember teaching out in the facility for all our parts of 2 years, and then to get blessed with this facility. And when we moved back in, Jim Christensen always talked about this. He was my mentor as a principal. He said, we will always do things with first class, or with high level of class, and we aren't going to bring any of that old stuff into that building. And when we moved in here in January of '99, there wasn't anybody more proud than Jim Christensen. And a funny story about Jim, they'd put a door in backwards in the closet in the main office, and he was up here on a weekend by himself, and he went into the closet, and the doorknob was in backwards. And he was literally locked in the closet for multiple hours, and he could not get out. He was ready to spend the night, I think, but somehow Lyle Nelson happened to come up here and found him and let him out. So that's a great Jim Christensen story. And to this day, I always think of first class when I think of Jim. So I talked about 3 great guys there that are no longer with us. Ken Schultz, Gene Shutt, Jim Christensen. All great fans, and I'm sure they're very, very proud looking down upon us tonight. What do I think? When it's all said and done, Ada Borup communities, they're just much stronger, and our school district was much stronger after the flood. I have never been in a community that has more supportive people, that deals things with class like we do here, and just demonstrate that Cougar pride. I am so proud to say that I lived here for 26 years, and it'll always be my home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good to see you again. Our next speaker, when he submitted his bio, I told myself that I would read his bio and I would preface it with a storyteller and a good friend. Don Valenga from Oaks, North Dakota, with educational degrees from Mayville State University and the University of North Dakota, superintendent of the Ada Borup schools from 1994 through 2000, retired in 2000 after 37 years of educational service to public schools. Please welcome and welcome back Don Valenga.
I wasn't expecting that. I also would like to give a special thanks to Mr. Tuttle and the band for their performances tonight, and certainly for Mr. Swinson, who has the Come Hell or High Water composer tonight. In my opinion, it's especially important to preserve the memory of the 1997 flood, because obviously it's had an indelible memory of certain things that happened in this community, in this region, and the support that we have received, I think, was overwhelming in regard to the support that we've had. Our communities, and it wasn't just Ada, it was the whole region around here. We had farmsteads that were underwater. We had the only way to enter the city of Ada, basically, I think, was from the north for most of the time. Obviously, the cost of this flood was tremendous. The cost of this particular educational system was around $24 million. And that includes everything from the building up of the earth so that they could put the new high school attached to the elementary school, because this was part of the floodplain. And the fact that we had to make sure that there was an environmental study in order to build this building on this particular land. Going back to that 117 inches of snow that we had in 96, 97, this caused our school district to have over 24 days that we were either late 2 hours or we did not have school whatsoever. And in March, we were then on an extended day for the students in order to make up the particular minutes that were required by the State Department. That particular Friday on April 4th, I remember the fact that we released most of the high school students to build a sandbag dike dam on the east side of Ada. The next day was a beautiful day again on Saturday, and Saturday night came along where we obviously had an impact from the storm. The impact of the storm caused the power outage of huge steel structures, transmission lines in the state of North Dakota, which affected the power grid right here in Ada. That particular night, we had obviously no power whatsoever. Many people were bailing out their sump pump area by hand throughout the evening, trying to save their lower level or their basement. On Saturday, the police chief, Greg Holmbeck, called and said, we need the buses. We need the school buses to get ready to evacuate the east side of town. The Borup School site became the basic site for the staging of where people would go to, call and talk to relatives and decide if they were going to stay in the Borup site or if they were going to head to Fargo, or at that time people were actually going to Grand Forks, Minneapolis. The Red Cross came to town, as well as the Salvation Army, and provided hot meals for the people that were protecting the town. We had the National Guard in the city of Ada for 11 days. The National Guard, they walked the dikes to make sure that the dikes were not going to leak, and they also protected our property. After the 11 days, the gathering place in Ada, and during the 11 days, was basically the VFW. The VFW had a huge generator that was provided by the National Guard, and that was the only building that had power and heat. And that was the central location for many of the people that were coming to visit our community, our devastated community. During this time, we then had one issue that had to be cleared up rather immediately, and that was the fact that in North Dakota, their regional center was Denver. Our regional center on the Minnesota side was Chicago. In regard to FEMA, our regional center had a policy that they would fund 75% at the national level. There would be 15% at the state level and 10% at the local level. So that was the formula for anybody that was flooded on the Minnesota side. On the North Dakota side, it was 85% through Denver and 15% through the state of North Dakota. So we asked, why can't we have the same factor that North Dakota has? Because of the fact that water that flooded North Dakota flooded Minnesota, and we wanted to be treated equally. That was decided that they would continue then with an 85-15% ratio between state as well as federal. Some of the people that were primary factors of working on the Ada school involved Hunter Groby, Vern Hunter, and Leo Groby. Kraus Anderson, they were a construction management firm, and that was John Hunick. Our health and safety personnel was Tom Stigsdal from our EXU. We had our FEMA representative that was by the name of Ed Vardo. Ed Vardo came in, and he was a guy that had just spent a couple of years in California, because back in the mid-90s, California had a terrible earthquake. And this Ed Vardo said, "I can't believe how honest you people are." And I said, "What?" And he said, "In California," he said, "it seemed like everybody was on the take for anything and everything." And he said, "You people are so honest, in regard to providing the accurate information that was needed." We also had to remove all of the asbestos of the boilers and the piping of the old school in order for that school to be collapsed. We had engineers and structural people that came in and said, we're going to study to see if it's cheaper to replace or rebuild. And I'll never forget the day that, our high school secretary, Jordy, came in with a little notepad that said, "Congratulations on your new high school." Trivelli from Crookston received a grant for counseling, and so that counseling was provided to any individual or any family that wanted to have counseling as a result of the impact that the flood had on their family. The generosity was unbelievable. The grand piano over there was donated by, I don't usually talk this much anymore. Ken and Helen Ellefson donated the grand piano. Punk Johnson, as you're well aware of the athletic field, about I'd say 6 months before the flood, donated a whole room full of computers to the high school. After the flood, we had people from, and there's a community and a school district in Ada, Oklahoma, that sent up books and supplies to the elementary school. We had people in California, people on the East Coast that were sending money or donating a lot of library books, to the school. Certainly the neighboring communities offered whatever they could, Norman County East, Norman County West, the Fargo schools, in regard to this. In Fargo, they had a whole semi-load of items that were shipped up here and parked over there by the Borup School with clothing and with soap, toothpaste, you name it. And it was basically for anyone who needed additional clothing or personal supplies. Certainly a special thanks has to be given to the businesses here in Ada, the families here in Ada, the staff that provided guidance during this particular flood. After the flood, our school district did not get back in session for 3 weeks. And the state suspended the additional minutes because they said, you've suffered enough. We started building the school in the fall, late, early winter of '97, and our goal was to be into this school by the spring, the second semester of '99. And we actually did make that, and we had graduation here. And that particular summer, I retired after 37 years of educational experience. I think I've had some wonderful board members. I've had some wonderful families, and certainly there are a lot of great memories other than the bad flood that we had here in Ada. And on behalf of myself, I think that this is a beautiful school, and it's certainly well kept by the present administrators and the present staff members, and certainly you as taxpayers. I think you have a school district that you can be extremely proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. James Lamont, current City of Ada Administrator. He's been here for almost 3 years and has assisted in efforts to lead the community in the transformation to a regional beacon for economic growth and community development. James is originally from New Jersey, Jersey boy, and is an Army veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom. While not working, James spends time with his lovely family and is wrapping up a PhD at NDSU. Please welcome James Lamont.
Well, hey, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this evening, and I'm humbled that I was asked to speak on behalf of the city, so thank you. About 3 years ago, I interviewed for the job here, and I flew in from Washington, D.C. via Chicago, and I remember flying into Fargo. It was my first time in this part of the plains, I guess. And I'm driving up, and for 45 minutes, and I see practically nothing. And I'm perplexed, and I pull in, and I know I'm at Ada at the four-way stop, and because my GPS told me that. And I'm looking at this building, and I don't know quite what it is. So I have a few minutes, and I pull into the subway parking lot. And I have a friend named Chris who I served with in the Army, and the North Jersey boy in me goes, hey, I take a picture of this gray building, and I said, hey, what kind of apartment building is this? And he replies to me about 5 minutes later, are you kidding me? It's a grain elevator. True story. But I tell you this because I had a 2-day interview process. And when I was interviewing, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't really work for any cities in the past. I came from Washington. And bottom line was, when I was here, there was really something special. It was a 2-day process. I met probably 50, 75 people because they had all of these events lined up. And I remember spending a night in the Norman Motel telling myself, something is different, something is different. And when we were offered the job, we were pretty quick to take it, and it really had a lot to do with the giving thanks component of the theme tonight. So since we've been here, and our hunch was correct, I've never lived in a place where people are They're resilient. You guys, you demonstrate a strength, I guess, that's unique to the upper Midwest that you don't really see in other parts of the world or the country. Just like the gentleman in California that told you everybody's here to rip you off. That's the way I grew up, and it's unfortunate, but here there is a sense of honesty, there is a sense of community, and there's a sense of accountability that you're really never going to find anywhere else. And so this experience over the last 3 years, on behalf of my wife and I and my son Miles, I'm just thankful to having shared that with you, because it's a side of the world that you really don't see very often, and you guys should be very proud of that. With respect to preserving our community for future generations, I think the first thing I really want to mention, because I think this is a big deal, in September this community will be 100% certified by FEMA as being flood resistant. So basically, you're going to be out of the flood zone effective mid-September, which I think is very special. As you talk about looking and preserving for future generations, at least you can know that you're at an elevation now to where you're protected from, the 3-level event that you experienced in '97. In addition to that, looking forward, you have this beautiful school. This is the first time I've been in this auditorium, and it's magnificent. I didn't even know it existed. But you have all of these gems throughout this community, and part of it is a result naturally of what you went through, but part of it really is that community spirit that you've coalesced around and you've grown together. Whether it's the school, whether it's the amount of donations and contributions that you see at the hospital, the nursing home, and the assisted living center, whether it's the community groups. You have like 10 community groups here that invest inordinate amounts of time, energy, resources, and it all comes together in the form of the growth and development that you're seeing today. And I really think you should be proud of that, because if it weren't for that spirit, I don't think you would have had that. So in an effort to get you back on track for the concert, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here, but I just want to say thank you, and I'm proud to be a part of your community.
Thank you, James. Come hell or high water. His name was mentioned earlier this evening. He is 14 years old, and I will welcome to share more of his story and the composition. Please welcome Carl Swenson.
About a year ago, Mr. Tuttle asked me to write a piece for the Ada 20th anniversary of the flood, and I was kind of nervous because I wasn't alive when the flood happened. So I researched footage from it, and I got to see all the footage from what it was like, and I thought it was crazy that there was basements flooded and boats on the road, and it was crazy seeing that happened. And so for this piece I wrote, I made a video to go along with it, and I have footage from KBLY and WDAY in it, along with some other footage that I got when we came up into Ada in the spring. And so the video kind of has 3 parts, and the first part is the flooding. The second part is the ice storm, and the third part is kind of what happened after and how the community pulled itself together after that. And I think it's really cool that you guys all made Ada even better than it was before the flood. And I would like to say thank you to Mr. Tuttle and his band for playing my piece. It's really awesome. And also the choir and their director, and all the people who came together to make this project what it is. Thank you.
To have the opportunity to begin tonight and now to be here with a close, it's pretty special. I had prepared some of those 700 words for 5 minutes or less. A lot of those words have been used tonight. A lot of the names have been shared. There are many memories. It's 20 years. To Richard Tuttle, where are you? Thank you so much for you to have this idea, to bring this forward, and to help carry it out means a great deal to this man and to this community. I was sitting here, and I know 20 years is a long time. I don't remember everything I did earlier today. I do not recall, and maybe it was because of spending the hours of sleepless nights and sleeping on floors and fire trucks in what we now know today as Studio 413. That was the old cop shop. Every time I walk in that building, I have no talent with art, but I have those memories of sleeping together and sharing tears and stories with grown men from the community, from the area, from the National Guard. To see this video tonight, I didn't remember seeing it back then. And to see the faces, and there are faces that are not here, some that have moved away. But I think of this, and it's the easiest way that I can share the memories and to give thanks and also to preserve. Carl Swenson, you young man, come up front and center. I don't ask you to come front and center to embarrass you. Those who know me know that I take a lot of things seriously, sometimes too serious. At the age you are, with the talent you have, and to include this community with your talent and your skills, that will preserve the memories and the thanks. Thank you so much. Your composition will now be music that will be played for years. You young people, you were not here 20 years ago. This is history. It is memories of this community where you have grown up, where you've been educated and are being educated. So we have those memories, those names, those faces. We have many to give thanks to. We can continue to give thanks, and we can do it possibly in this continued way. As you saw those photos of 1997 comparing to 2017, as you think of 1997 to 2017, a lot of good has happened. There was good at the time when people were working together in the community, young and old, in the county, in the region. That, when you look back through history, when it turns out to be good, has not and will not change. We have a progressive community that is vibrant and can, and when we continue to work together, will become more vibrant. Working together, we will continue to grow. Tonight, the memories that we remember. Tonight, the thanks that we can and need to continue to share. Tonight, we preserve.
Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself?
Remember, give thanks, preserve. As I was asked to MC, I wondered what I could or should talk about. I also realize I only have 5 minutes. That's approximately 700 words to wrap up 20 years of memories from the flood of 1997. I've worn many hats, and I've shared words, I've shared stories. Some of my words and stories tonight, most of you have not heard from this voice as I saw it in my eyes in the flood of 97. Tonight, I'm not the reporter, I'm not the broadcaster, I'm not the dad, I'm not the husband, I'm not the radio station owner, I'm a guy to talk about 20 years ago, and I hope I do justice. On Valinga, in the old high school, on the steps going down, with cheeks filled with tears, and to know, even though it was unofficial, that there was a gut feeling that FEMA would allow for the school to be rebuilt. The Red Cross, the Salvation Army, giving thanks for 20 years every time I see a kettle. To stay in the Norman Motel, a wife, a mother, 3 kids, 5 in one room, and to watch the TV and to see the fires in Grand Forks and tears run down my cheeks and to be able to say, they have it worse. It was time to move forward. It was time to move on. With every power outage to follow, created more stress, more headaches. The transmitter site to this day brings back memories. That old building has been removed, but the memories are still there. The appreciation supper with the National Guard in June of 97. I have more stories. It's not left me. There's still some scars that come up preparing for tonight. It's 20 years in 5, because it was to be Jake's first communion on Sunday, which was postponed because of no power. The radio station was now off the air, and I went uptown to see Greg Holmvik, who was the civil defense director, and it was not looking good. On Sunday, I spoke with Mr. Holmvik, and he said, Burke, you've got a wife and 3 little kids. Get the hell out of town. So we spent the night in Borup at the school. On Monday, we went to Fargo, driving down the road as power lines were across the road. On Tuesday, I received a phone call from Greg Holmvik that implied, I need help. The media is driving me nuts. I don't know how to deal with them. You do. Would you come back and help? I had now found my comfort. To get a ride back to Ada and to have to go through security to get back into the community, I wondered, where had my freedom gone? I wondered what would happen to the community, to my family, to my business. To tell Mayor Russ Onstad at the time when I returned that we would now be having morning and nightly meetings and that we would squash all the rumors and all stories would now come through myself and through Greg Holmvik. Somewhere in my possessions, I have those daily notes and that diary and audio. The factual stories would soon be coming out. The Norman County Index would not miss a publication. We would sleep on the cop shop floor. We would spend a night sleeping in the front seat of the fire truck inside the fire hall. We were blessed with the National Guard to come to provide cots so that we could sleep on a cot. Steve Petrie Bruce Visser, many others, and myself, a bond was formed. CNN reporters, all media outlets, to stand next to FEMA Director James Lee Witt with Superintendent Don. After the funeral of Bernadette's mother, we drove back through North Dakota on our way home to Ada and saw all the water and had an empty feeling in the stomach. When we returned to Ada, the 10-foot pile of snow in our driveway when we left on Tuesday was now down to less than 1 foot. It was April 4, 5, 6, and 7. Those 4 days, in my eyes, is when it all started, depending upon where you lived and what you were doing in your life at that time. Arriving home on Friday evening and getting up on Saturday morning, as the Ada Borup PTC president, I informed Olin Church that I would not be helping at the PTC Craft Fair because the transmitter site was underwater. As family members were here for that weekend,